Imagine a war so long that a child born at its beginning would grow old before it finally ended. A war filled with crowned kings, broken promises, brutal battles, and shifting loyalties. Two powerful nations, England and France, locked in a deadly struggle that would last not years, not decades, but more than a century. This was not a single, continuous fight, but a series of wars, pauses, and renewed violence that scarred Europe and changed the course of history forever. Castles burned, armies marched across muddy fields, and generations grew up knowing nothing but conflict. What started as a royal argument over a crown would soon turn into one of the most influential wars the world has ever seen. The Hundred Years' War began in 1337, when the King of England claimed he had the rightful claim to the French throne. On the surface, it seemed like a family dispute between royal bloodlines, but beneath it lay deeper tensions over land, power, and control. England already ruled parts of France, and French kings wanted those lands back. At the same time, England depended heavily on French territories for wealth and influence. When diplomacy failed, swords were drawn, and Europe was pulled into chaos. This war would introduce new ways of fighting, challenge the dominance of armored knights, and elevate ordinary soldiers into history-making warriors. It would witness stunning English victories, devastating French defeats, and a miraculous French revival led by an unlikely hero. By the time the war ended in 1453, both nations had been transformed. The Hundred Years' War was not just a fight between two kingdoms, it was the moment when medieval Europe began to change into the modern world. Imagine Europe in the 14th century, where kings believed their bloodline gave them the right to rule entire nations. In this tense world, a single claim to a throne would ignite a conflict that lasted more than 100 years. The Hundred Years' War did not begin with massive armies marching at once. It began with pride, ambition, and unresolved rivalries between England and France. When the French king died without a clear male heir, the English king declared that he, through his mother, was the rightful ruler of France. The French nobles rejected this claim, believing only a French-born ruler could wear their crown. What followed was not just a disagreement, but a declaration of war that would echo through generations. Villages were turned into battlefields, economies collapsed, and ordinary people became victims of royal ambition. At first, few could imagine that this struggle would stretch across a century, shaping the destiny of Europe and redefining warfare forever. In the early stages of the war, England shocked the world with its military success. Though often outnumbered, English armies relied on discipline and a powerful new weapon, the longbow. At battles like Crécy and Poitiers, heavily armored French knights charged confidently, only to be cut down by waves of arrows. These victories shattered the myth that knights were unstoppable and proved that strategy and technology could defeat brute force. English kings captured French territory and even took the French king prisoner, humiliating a proud nation. France seemed broken, divided by internal conflicts and weak leadership. For a time, it looked as though England might truly succeed in ruling France. These early triumphs marked a turning point in medieval warfare and showed the world that the battlefield was changing. As the war dragged on, fortunes began to shift. England faced internal problems, including political instability and financial strain. Maintaining distant territories became costly, and support at home weakened. France, meanwhile, slowly reorganized and learned from its defeats. Stronger leadership emerged, and new tactics reduced the effectiveness of English advantages. Castles were reclaimed, supply lines disrupted, and English forces pushed back. The conflict became less about quick victories and more about survival. Both nations suffered terribly, with famine, disease, and destruction spreading across the countryside. This middle phase of the war proved that neither side could easily dominate the other, turning the conflict into a long and exhausting struggle. Then came one of the most extraordinary moments in military history. A young peasant girl named Joan of Arc claimed she was guided by divine voices to save France. Against all odds, she inspired French troops and restored their confidence. Her leadership helped lift the siege of Orleans, a victory that reignited French resistance. Soldiers who once feared defeat now believed their nation could be saved. Joan became a symbol of hope and national identity, though her fate was tragic. Captured by the English and executed, her legacy only strengthened France's determination. Her role marked a psychological turning point, proving that belief and unity could be as powerful as weapons. By the final phase of the war, France had gained the upper hand. Improved artillery, stronger central authority, and renewed national unity allowed French forces to push England out of nearly all its territories. In 1453, the war effectively ended, leaving England with only a small foothold in France. Though no formal peace treaty was signed, the fighting was over. The 100 Years' War reshaped both nations, ending feudal warfare and laying the foundation for modern states. It was more than a series of battles, it was the birth of national identity, a lesson in the cost of ambition, and a reminder that history is shaped not only by kings, but by the people who endure their wars. The 100 Years' War finally came to an end in 1453, but its impact did not end on the battlefield. After more than a century of bloodshed, both England and France were forever changed. France emerged stronger, more united, and with a clear sense of national identity, while England turned its focus inward, a shift that would later lead to major political changes at home. Warfare itself was transformed. Armored knights faded into history, and new weapons and tactics shaped the future of combat. This war was not just about kings and crowns. It was about power, pride, and the price ordinary people paid for royal ambition. Entire generations lived and died without knowing peace, yet from that chaos, modern Europe began to take shape. The 100 Years' War reminds us that history is not only written by victories, but by endurance, sacrifice, and change. If you want to understand how nations are born, and how the medieval world gave way to the modern age, this war tells that story like no other.